It's time to pull those belts tight, race fans. The front stretch is coming at you, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. Now, here's Dan Taylor and Dirk Houston.
Well, good morning to you, race fans, and welcome to the front stretch, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs, online at joeskarting.com. All your tax refund checks are in the mail. Maybe they're already deposited and you've got a little bit left over. Head on over to Joe's Karting, do a little tax refund racing.
Or you're getting scammed like me, and IRS is calling you on a voice recorder saying there's a federal warrant out for your arrest, and to call us immediately.
I don't doubt the federal warrant part. You're a little bit of a shady individual. But
Well, I thought it was legal in that state, I swear.
Today's show for you. Listen, this is an oddity. Can you remember the last time we didn't have a single interview lined up?
And we have been trying is the bad part. I can remember times when we forgot to call people back, but we still got something put together. But I've been trying to chase a few people, and maybe they listen to this Sunday show and will call me back. We want to talk to you.
Maybe, but we're like we said last weekend, we're working on some drag racer interviews. Get you ready for the Kansas Nationals, which are coming up May 19th, 20th, and 21st. I don't know if we're going to do any NASCAR interviews between now and Kansas weekend, because usually we like to save those for when we're in person. I've sent out interview requests for Ryan Blaney, Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, and Kyle's usually good at getting back to us about doing interviews with him. I really want to ask Kyle when he's planning on retiring, because that seems to be the fad right now. I don't know if you noticed, there was a little bit of retirement news earlier this week.
Wow, what could that be?
Yeah. Anyways, we got interview requests lined up for Kansas while we're at Kansas Speedway for the Go Bowling 400 May 13th, and we're working on local interviews. So, like for instance, this coming Friday at the Bobby Parker Memorial at I-80 Speedway, fingers crossed that it doesn't get rained out this week, that we're going to try to sit down with Thomas Kennedy, the driver of the 5K, who is now 3 for 3 with the Nebraska 360s. He won the 2 season openers at I-80 Speedway during the Bug Eater Bash, and then he went out to Park Jefferson 2 weeks ago and won that race. So he's doing really well, and I wanted to talk to him because we've never had Thomas on the show before. I've heard very little about him. I only know he's a Canadian. He's from north of the border, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of jokes to be able to kind of prod with him on that. And we're also working on some local interviews. I want to get Adam Armstrong on the show because he's finally set down in that B-Mod and doing really well. He's won himself a couple of races. Danny Lasowski, we love talking to Danny. He's always a good interview and find out what's going on with him since he split up from the Muddy car and his crew chief guy. And other interviews, we still haven't got to talk to Andrew Kaziski, and it's probably about time we have Stan back on the show.
Yeah, Stan's due to be on, and I've also, speaking of the Kansas stuff we're trying to put together, I've been in contact with John Wood, who'd be the third generation of the Wood brothers, who was driving, and he drove trucks in the Truck Series and did some Xfinity and some Cup racing. But I got to know him when I was working in the Truck Series, and he's now at administration with the Wood brothers.
For the Wood brothers?
Yeah, he's going to be the heir apparent owner. His dad's listed as one of the owners right now currently. And I've been in contact with him, so hopefully we're going to sit down and talk to him in Kansas.
That'd be a lot of fun. There's a lot of great things coming up, but today it kind of worked out in our favor because going into the week on Monday is usually when I sit down and plan out the show, and I think, okay, who can we get for interviews? Well, on Monday, I wasn't even to work before I got the text messages that Dale Earnhardt Jr. had apparently announced his retirement. Was that Monday or Tuesday that they'd sent out the press release?
It was Tuesday morning. Saw it.
Okay.
I saw it about 8 o'clock in the morning. Somebody had already posted it, and I was like, wow. That'd be like 7 o'clock on the East Coast. And I'm like, no, it's 9 o'clock on the East Coast. I was doing the math backwards, and it took a while to sink in. Yeah, they could have had a press conference already.
Well, and so after I read that, I thought, well, there's no need to do interviews this week. That's what the show is going to be centered around, is Dale Earnhardt Jr., his retirement, what it means for the sport, and what's next. I mean, that's probably the two biggest questions that are going around NASCAR right now. What's it mean for the sport, and what's next?
You know what would have been nice is if we'd have had a night race this Saturday, and we'd be talking about this with live, because we could open up the phones and got a little activity.
Yeah, we could have. And I'm working out the ways in my head to try to do some sort of Facebook living when we do topics like this so that people can chime in and we can talk about it. My little pea brain hasn't worked it out quite yet, but I'm getting there.
And I'm not techie enough. My pea brain's not even going to try to work that out.
But for today's show, we're going to talk about Dale Earnhardt Jr. We're obviously in turn number 1 going to recap Bristol as we always do. Then in turns 2 and 3, we'll talk about Dale Earnhardt Jr., who's next on the list to retire, what's it mean, who's going to take over the 88. I had a lot of fun on the Front Stretch Facebook page with the unsubstantiated speculation and the rampant speculation with little to no credible
but I got the scoop. I got the scoop. I did some research. Rick Hendrick's stepping into the car.
Oh, okay.
He's
that
always
makes
wanted
sense.
to.
That makes sense. So we'll talk about that in turns 2 and 3, and then turn number 4, we'll wrap up the show by previewing the race today at Richmond. By the way, today is the last race in the Crewman for a Day contest.
Are we going to talk about that too?
Oh, I think we'll get to it. And by the way, the Crewman for a Day contest brought to you by Rick Haven Ridge of Wealth Partners, also the season-long contest. Thank you to Rick for sponsoring those 2 contests and making sure that we have a easy source for our fantasy contests.
And we've also got to thank the Mittler Brothers and Kansas Speedway for helping us out with that.
I got to call Mike and just kind of get him updated and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Turn number 1, as always, brought to you by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs, online at joeskarting.com. It's karting with a K. Get to Joe's today, fast-paced white knuckle racing, and you can use a little bit of that tax refund to do some racing at Joe's Karting. Bristol Motor Speedway. We knew this going into Thursday and Friday that race was looking pretty shaky.
Yeah.
And I actually give NASCAR a little bit of credit. They didn't make fans wait it out and see if they could get it in. I never actually got to see any of the broadcasts on Sunday. And but from what I understand, I mean, it was a downpour the entire time.
I mean, they called, 10:30?
I think
hour
it was
and a half
about
early?
Then. Yeah.
You know, so yeah, they didn't fool around. They knew it was going to happen all day. Even though that track is pretty much self-drying and they could dry that little bull ring in probably 45 minutes to an hour, they still knew they'd be trying to dry it about 10 times. Mm-hmm. You know, so
a lot of rain in the area. It really affected qualifying and practice, and it affected the Xfinity race on Saturday. And so, come Sunday morning, they knew they weren't going to get it in. They just said, let's let everybody hang out at their hotel rooms. They postponed the race till Monday, and unfortunately, because of a little bit of a mix-up, not a lot of people actually got to watch it on Fox and Fox Sports 1 because they messed up something on their end. And so, really, the only way you could watch it was on the Fox Sports Go app. Which I don't have on.
I watched it on TV.
You did, because I heard they messed it up and people weren't able to watch it.
I watched it on regular Fox, just like it was supposed to be Sunday.
I was in training sessions for my real work, and so I'm sitting in there.
You got real work?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, too bad, dude.
Well, they're training me on how to do the real work. It wasn't very effective because I kept pulling up NASCAR.com and following how the race was going. Kyle Larson started on the pole and had a very strong car early on.
People that are knocking this racing right now, just as I said last year at this time, the Bristol race last year was fantastic. So was the Richmond race the week behind it. If anybody's forgotten, that was where Carl Edward dumped his teammate, Kyle Busch, in turn 3 and 4 to win the race, and Carl had won at Bristol. But the racing this weekend, both the Xfinity race and the Cup race, was very good racing. If you're knocking NASCAR right now, go ahead and knock the mile and a half because we're probably all in the same boat there. But this short track racing, you guys got to turn the TV on and start watching some of it. It has really been good racing. Jimmy Johnson wins from the middle of the pack, did not have the fastest car. Kyle Larson had the fastest car. Martin Truex had the second fastest car. But due to the wonderful pit road speeding penalties, they both had to fight through the field. And Kyle got clear back up to second place from 20th with 100 laps to go. And I think they had one pit stop in there. And if it would have been 10 laps to go or possibly a green-white checkered, I think Kyle would have beat Jimmy. I think he would have put him in the wall and beat him. And it would have been no bump and run. It would have been stuff him and run.
That's the kind of stuff we love to see. And this will be a conversation for turn 2, I think a little bit more of a conversation for turn 2. But I think Kyle Larson, the only thing he's really lacking is a little bit of a chrome horn. He's been very gentle with his competition, which is just his style of racing. He said it all his life.
How he grew up. You didn't have a chrome horn in a sprint car.
Yeah, right.
You
Absolutely.
had a slide job.
But you've got to have one, especially at Bristol and Martinsville. And I think Richmond is one of those tracks that you've got to have a chrome horn. Larson ends up claiming segment 1, followed by Martin Truex Jr. and Eric Jones, top 3 in segment number 1. Good finish for Eric.
Won the race on Saturday in Xfinity Series. He knew what he was doing, and he got caught up in a little bumping late in the race and relegated, stayed on the lead lap, but ended up like 17th. But he was definitely a top 3 or 4 car.
And finished 6th in segment 2, talking about Eric Jones. So consistently a good car. And I felt kind of bad for you because you that was your guy on Sunday/Monday. But as you and I were talking about it, you said, I think Eric's on his way to a top 5. Good. I need those points. And then, what was it, just laps after you messaged me that he ended up in the wall.
But he still ended up, I still gained in the standings, even with a 17th place finish because of all the Kyle Busch lovers.
Because Kyle Busch was the most picked. Then it was Keselowski. And then it was
Busch, Brad Kay, and Eric Jones.
Okay. Eric Jones was the next one. So even then, but Brad Keselowski, Kyle Busch in the season-long contest had 16 people that took him. And in the 5-week contest had 12. By far, he was the most. I think Keselowski and Jones were both tied for second most picked with 5 picks in the season-long contest. So it was, some of the top fantasy picks fell out of it quickly. Jimmy Johnson, though, ends up muscling his way to the front. After he wins that race, you go, everybody said the same thing. Didn't see it coming, but I'm not surprised that it did.
Well, my brother and I were talking before the race. He goes, is Johnson going to go on a roll? And my only thought to him was he wasn't great in any of the practices. He did okay. And he's got like 2 wins there. You know, Kurt Busch has like a half a dozen. He ends up he has 5. Mm-hmm. And, Kyle's got several. Brad's got a couple, and they were all starting in front of him. Well, Kurt Busch wasn't. He was back 16th or something like that. But there were a lot better picks than Jimmy Johnson. And again, Johnson won without the best car. Yeah,
and how about this? Your runner-up, Clint Bowyer. Great news. Great for Clint. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I can't even remember where it was, at Auto Club when he finished top 3 and how excited he was for it. And I think he had a better car than Jimmy Johnson.
He did.
And had there been another caution, it would have been really interesting to watch that play out because I think Clint would have gone hard for that win, especially after the year and a half he's won. Kevin Harvick comes home 3rd, Matt Kenseth 4th, Joey Logano 5th. Good for Matt Kenseth. Once again, we've talked about it. Matt's had some pretty hard hits the first 6-7 races of the season, and now to knock off 2 good finishes is good for that 20 team. Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Martin Truex Jr., Ricky Stenhouse Jr., and Denny Hamlin round out your top 10. Once again, we're talking about Ricky Stenhouse Jr., which I'm kind of surprised. Twice so far this season we've talked about Ricky Stenhouse Jr. We've gone entire seasons without talking about him unless he was involved in an accident.
Unless he was being mentioned in the same sentence with Danica.
True. So good for Ricky Stenhouse. It gives me hope that Roush is starting to kind of get their stuff together and give at least Ricky a car that he can run with.
Well, the 17 and the 6 both ran good at Texas.
Yeah.
Him and Trevor Bayne both had good runs at Texas. So, maybe they're starting to listen to the Ford people instead of, trying to be out there on their own.
As I mentioned before, Kyle Larson won segment number 1. Martin Truex Jr. won segment number 2. And Jimmy Johnson won the race. Your points on the day, the big point getter was Jimmy Johnson. 5 points for segment 1, 5th in segment 1, 3rd in segment 2. And he won the race, so he takes home the big points. Second place, Clint Bowyer. This talks about how important the stage racing finishes is. Clint Bowyer only took home 35 points from yesterday, or from the race at Bristol last weekend, and that's just simply because he didn't have the car at the beginning or the middle of the race, so he didn't place in the top 10 in the first 2 stages.
The exact same thing that Brad Keselowski did at California.
Right.
Nothing in the first 2 stages, but second place for the race.
And I think this is going to start sinking in, even though, Clint's excited. We got a second place finish. He got less of a points day than 3rd, 4th, and 5th because he didn't finish high in the stages. So they're going to start, I think you're going to start seeing these guys really start to realize it as the season ramps up and you start to really, we got to push for all those stage points.
Well, if you look at Eric Jones's finish, like 3rd in the first stage, 5th or 6th in the second stage.
6th.
And then a 17th place finish, he probably came out with pretty much the same points as what Bowyer had.
Trying to look him up real quick. Yeah, 17th place finish, 33 points. He finished 2 points behind Clint Bowyer.
And 12 places behind, or 15 places
15
behind
places behind him, absolutely. So it's, that stage racing, it's still new. They all knew it going into Daytona, the impact. Now they're starting to feel it. And now you're going to start really sensing it. And I think, go ahead and finish your thought real quick.
I don't think they really did see what the impact was going to be, but now they are.
And I think that when we talk about that, those bubble races that start to happen 10 races before the playoffs lock, I think that's going to start to ramp up a little quicker. It's going to start to be 15 races before the final Richmond race, which locks you into the playoffs. I think you're going to start to see that bubble race start to heat up a lot quicker. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. Turn number 2, we will talk Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s retirement. We'll be back here on the Front Stretch.
The NHRA Mellow Yellow Drag Racing Series is headed back to Topeka. Feel the power that pummels the senses with 10,000 horsepower at speeds over 330 miles per hour. Every ticket's a pit pass at the Menards NHRA Heartland Nationals, presented by Minties, May 19th through 21st at Heartland Park, Topeka. Kids 12 and under are free in general admission. Get tickets early and save at nhra.com/tickets or call 800-884-NHRA. Ignite your senses.
Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs has taken a page out of IMCA's rulebook and gone crate. These brand new low-emission engines will still have you white-knuckling it all through the Metro's fastest indoor facility. Joe's Karting is now friendly for all skill levels with their brand new Honda-powered engines. It's time to get to Joe's today and find out what drivers like Jack Dover, Shaylee Bate, and Andrew Kosiski have known for years. Located in Council Bluffs and online at joeskarting.com. That's karting with a K.
We're hooked up in turn 2 and still showing the green flag on the front stretch.
Welcome back to the Front Stretch. Heading into turn number 2, brought to you by Kansas Speedway. Tickets for the Toyota Tundra 250 Truck Series race, Friday, May 12th, and the Go Bowling 400 Cup Series race on Saturday, May 13th at Kansas Speedway are available now. Call 866-460-RACE or go to kansasspeedway.com. I've been seeing on Facebook all week long for the last couple of weeks. Tickets starting at $64.
BYOB.
Yes, I'm pretty sure. Now, don't quote me because I don't think I actually know this right, but if they're talking about tickets starting at $64, I'm pretty sure you can get them for $29. I think I was surfing for them about a month ago, and maybe those are all sold out. Maybe that's why they're saying $64 now, but up in the nosebleed sections, even the Saturday night cup race, I'm pretty sure I saw adult tickets for $29.
I was going to say, that sounds like that might be the price. If they're $64 for the cup race, $29 might have been for the truck race.
That could have been that I had the wrong race selected. But
that to me makes sense. But
still, that's a great price to get into the race on Saturday night. And by the way,
take your kids to the truck race. 12 and under kids get in free.
Mm-hmm. One of the last opportunities to see Dale Earnhardt Jr. race at Kansas. It's one of 2 of your last opportunities. And who knows what's going to happen with that race on Saturday night. What are you laughing about?
I've already been practicing my pitch for Saturday night. When I go up to Junior's pit after every pit stop and say, hey, can I get a couple lug nuts? They look at you and they always say, how many? And I say, all of them.
There's a couple of drivers that could be using a few extra lug nuts. Martin Truex Jr. felt the lug nut pinch. Well, he didn't. Cole Pern, his crew chief, felt the lug nut pinch after Bristol. The penalties came down last Wednesday earlier this week that Cole was fined $10,000 for having one of the 20 lug nuts not properly secured, and that is a $10,000 fine for the crew chief. I think 2 or more is $15,000 and crew chief gets suspended. 4 or more, and it's a pretty substantial fine.
Yeah, it's 3 or more if it gets pretty substantial. And just one not being tight, that happens every pit stop.
Yeah.
So, now if it wasn't on the car altogether, that's a whole nother ball game. But to just have one not tight, I don't even know why they bother, but NASCAR's trying, so I will give them all the credit for that.
Well, and maybe we're going to diverge a little bit here from our main topic, but I think the reason why they are so strict on this policy is because Tony Stewart came out and blasted him about the lug nut. Remember years ago, what was it, a year or 2 ago, that you didn't have to get all the lug nuts on.
Last year.
They would let you leave the pits with 3 lug nuts on the car. And NASCAR
There wasn't even no rule with 3. The wheel just had to stay on the car.
Right. And what race was it? Was it Texas or was it?
It was a 1.5 mile track. I don't remember if it was Texas or Darlington maybe.
Because it was a track that they talked about how the G-forces were so high.
Yeah, I mean, it was a high-speed track. It wasn't Martinsville, Bristol, Richmond. It wasn't any of the little tracks. It wasn't a road course. But, it was one of the bigger, faster tracks. And, I know the drivers, they didn't like that. They want 5. Yeah. They want 10 lug nuts on if they can have them.
So after that race, NASCAR kind of came out and said, well, we're gonna review this rule. And then 2 days later, Tony Stewart made an announcement blasting NASCAR. I mean, just blasting them. And I think everybody's been listening to the show long enough to know I'm a Tony Stewart fan. I was against him on that. I thought, what was the point in saying that? And so they fined him for coming out and saying that because it was actions detrimental to stock car racing and to the league. I completely supported their penalty because I thought it was an uncalled for statement that basically threw NASCAR under the bus while they were trying to think of the ways to fix this.
$40,000 fine, and I remember every driver said, "I'm in for a little of that."
Every driver
that's right. Backed him up.
They all pitched in to help pay it. But and then just later that week, a couple days after Tony made the statement, they came out with the new rule, said all 5 have to be on. And then they refined the rule weeks later and started inspecting as drivers were coming down after the cool-down lap. So, yeah, the lug nut rule is very necessary and very needed. So it's great to see that. All right, the story of the week, easily probably the story of the year. I thought the story of the year was easily going to be Carl Edwards making his sudden retirement, but I was really surprised when Dale Earnhardt Jr. announced his retirement. And by the way, just to continue our conversation last week, Hendrick Motorsports did it right. The press announcement, by the way.
Absolutely.
They sent out a press release at about 7 a.m. Eastern Time on Tuesday morning and said, please join us for a press conference at Hendrick Motorsports with Dale Earnhardt Jr. to announce his retirement at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. See, our big gripe with that is that Joe Gibbs forgot to say what time when they sent out their tweet.
About what?
Right, about what. So... anyways, we'll get off that topic for just a second. That was the initial, wait a minute, what? It was an official press release. They said it right in the press release. Dale Earnhardt Jr. intends to announce his retirement. And all of Facebook, all of Twitter, all of social media, all the internet just blew up talking about it. I mean, it was all over everything. People who are casual fans were emailing me, and people who were not fans, didn't really care anything about the sport, knew I was a NASCAR fanatic, knew I have the French stretch, was emailing me going, what's going on?
Even the people bashing the sport got into this one.
And, of course, they said that this is the nail in the coffin, that NASCAR can't survive after this. And, by the way, I want to have Tom Latham on the show because I think that would be a good old Jerry Springer show. I may be one person on the show, Tom may be another, and you may be Steve the security guard. Because every opportunity, I like Tom. I do like Tom, but any opportunity he gets to jump on NASCAR, he does. And I'll tell you, I'm a fan of both sports. There is no need to jump all over NASCAR or for me to jump all over dirt track racing the way Tom jumps on NASCAR. There's no need for that to happen. It's just detrimental to the entire sport. And I would just love to point out that if NASCAR falls and NASCAR goes away like everyone thinks it's going to after the 2017 season, dirt track racing is not going to be too far behind. Because I think that even though it's the roots of NASCAR and it is definitely the feeder system to NASCAR and it is definitely beneficial to NASCAR, I think dirt track racing depends on NASCAR just as much because a lot of that corporate dollars will go away.
Well, I don't totally agree with you on that in the fact that I don't think dirt track racing at the local level depends on NASCAR because Sunset Speedway didn't have a dime from NASCAR until NASCAR got involved in the weekly racing series in the early 80s, and that place was a gold mine. It was that was, as they said, the place to be on Sunday night.
Yeah.
And
well, I think that NASCAR fans feed into dirt racing. And this is my example, and maybe it's a bad example. I was a fan of NASCAR for 10 years before I had any idea what dirt track racing was. I'd had a couple of friends that talked about it at high school, but I dismissed it as just something they did on the weekend. And I had no idea that there was I-80 Speedway, Eagle Raceway, Knoxville Raceway. Had no clue those tracks even existed until my first dirt track race in April of 2012 when Buddy Ray took me out to the Spring Meltdown at I-80 Speedway. And from there, I've been a big dirt track fan. But I think that NASCAR is kind of that gateway drug. It's the race you see on Sunday, but then you go to the dirt track on Friday and Saturday night and see your local guys driving, and it's like the exposure to it. That I don't think that dirt track's going to be able to pull in the new fans that NASCAR can if NASCAR goes away.
Yeah, see, I still think they will. Matter of fact, it'll probably, in all honesty, the people that enjoy the racing that sit in front of the TV on Saturday night, they'll go to a local track to see some if they can't see it on TV on Saturday and Sunday anymore. That's one thing with NASCAR, like with Charlotte deciding to go ahead and put their race back on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
If NASCAR would give up the Saturday night racing, it would be a plus for the dirt track boys.
I agree, and it's a plus all around. Fans wanted Saturday night racing. They wanted to see racing under the let me take it back. They wanted to see racing under the lights.
They wanted to see racing when they could drink beer and not have to get up and go to work the next day. Is when they want to see.
Exactly. So NASCAR said, let's try it on Saturday night. Ticket sales are poor. TV sales are TV ratings are terrible. So I think they're going to start getting away from Saturday night or Saturday night racing, because Saturday night's the night you go out. I mean, for us race fans, we go out to a dirt track on Saturday night.
Well,
Friday night.
You're competing against college football in the fall.
Right.
You're competing against everything in the spring and summer.
Just plain going out. I mean, I love going out on a Saturday night, going out to the bar, going out to Quaker Steak and Lube and grabbing some dinner, or going over to Joe's Karting and do a little bit of racing. I like going out and being social on Fridays and Saturdays. Monday through Thursday, those are my days to lock down. It's actually Sunday through Thursday are my lockdown days. I usually don't leave the house much unless I'm out for work.
Yeah.
So, and we'll get back to the Dale Earnhardt Jr. conversation. So he announces his retirement and says that it's just time for him to move on and try new things, and that he made this decision about a month ago. And he sat down with Rick Hendrick, and he was really worried. I thought it was a pretty emotional press conference for him at times. Carl Edwards got choked up at times. Didn't get choked up like Brett Favre did when he announced his first or second retirement?
Or third or fourth? Or
which retirement was it? Anyways, but Dale, I think at times Dale did get choked up. And absolutely, I mean, he's walking away from something that...
It's the only job he's ever had.
Right, and it's been his life for so long. I mean, longer than most people. You talk about NASCAR being... Jimmy Johnson's life. Well, Jimmy had the first 10 years of his life that wasn't about racing. I think Jimmy was 9 when he got onto a dirt track, a motorcycle for the first time and started racing. But Dale grew up at the track, and I think that's another reason why Dale is such a loved character, is because he was the one sitting in victory lane with his dad, and he took over the throne at the tragic passing of his dad.
And yeah, it's I think it hit him when he missed the second half of last year.
Yeah.
That I can still go to the track as my owner for my Xfinity cars. I won't be far away from these people that I love so much, and this sport, but I don't have to drive anymore.
Yeah. And maybe Tony Stewart showed him a little bit of that too.
Well,
with what
Tony's
Stewart doing these first couple of races.
Married.
That's going to help. I mean, I think absolutely this isn't a my performance is bad, so I'm just going to go and hang it up. There's a lot of factors that went into Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s retirement.
A whole lot of them. I mean, I think, in all honesty, was he 42, 43? He's somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Now that he's gotten married, I think he's probably going to want to have a couple kids. I really do. And, get them up in racing and whatnot. And he knows that he's getting up in years,
Yeah.
And
he is one of the old guards. I mean, it's crazy
absolutely.
to think it, but he is. I was thinking about it this week as everyone was talking about who's coming in next. There's 3 generations to NASCAR right now. There's the old guard, there's the current guard, and there's the new guard. And the new guard is the guys that are, quite frankly, that are winning right now. Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney.
Chris Buescher's having solid qualifying year. His races haven't been real good, but
absolutely. There's Austin Dillon,
Jeffrey Earnhardt,
Austin Dillon, Daniel Suarez.
Talk about an outside bid to get in that 88, Mr. Jeffrey Earnhardt.
There's a lot of guys that are counted as the new guard, and then you have your current guard, which I think are like Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Clint Boyer, Denny Hamlin, Brad Keselowski, Joey Logano. And then you have your old guard. And this is what we're going to talk about coming up at turn number 3 is your old guard. Who are those guys that are getting ready to retire, and what's that going to mean for the sport? We've seen big names retire from this sport before. A lot of times. Cale Yarborough, Richard Petty, Kyle Petty, when he retired, that's a joke. I'm sorry.
Well, Dale Jarrett.
Dale Jarrett, Rusty Wallace, Darrell Wallace.
Ricky Rudd, Darrell Waltrip.
Thank you, Darrell Waltrip, not Darrell Wallace, who is currently still driving the Xfinity Series.
Now that you brought Darrell Wallace up, I hope somebody besides me watched the Xfinity race the other day. Darrell punted our buddy Brendan Gaughan.
Oh.
And Brendan gave him a one-finger salute as he drove by. And, I mean, it was just as big as the camera could get. They were focused right in. Brendan drops his window net, and, hey, you're number one. And then a few laps later, Wallace gets crashed out. And he climbs out of his car, and he walks down the garage area because it was the other end of the track, and he goes to the thing. And right as he's getting to the infield care center, Brendan is walking out. They had a good laugh about it. You know, Wallace was apologizing on the radio, said, go talk to his spotter. I did not. And you could hear in the car because they had the in-car camera in Wallace's car. Wallace lifted, did not just turn Brendan on purpose.
Yeah.
You know, it's just one of them things. But, yeah, they had a good laugh about it. But the one-finger salute was so funny. Gotta love Brendan.
And so talking about this Dale Earnhardt Jr. thing, I'm really surprised that so many people are talking about that Dale fans are just going to stop watching the sport altogether. Because never in the history of this sport have fans turned away like that. I mean, Richard Petty was probably the only other person you could compare to Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s popularity. Even his dad. Let's be frank. His dad was not a popular driver.
His dad was more of a Kyle Busch.
Until the day he died. It's cruel to say, and I'm sorry if it offends you, but people hated Dale Earnhardt Sr. because he wrecked your guy.
Yep.
But then when he died, and you kind of started seeing all the tributes, you went, oh God, look at what we've lost. You know,
exactly.
And then you fell in love with him, and you went and bought the Earnhardt gear, and you probably started following Junior at that time. So we've never seen somebody so popular of Dale Earnhardt Jr. probably since Richard Petty. And man, I can't believe people are talking about turning away from the sport. It's still racing.
Well, he's a 14-time, reigning most popular driver. And I don't think if he would have come either several years earlier into the top ranks or if his father would have stayed along several years later, I don't think he'd have had that title. He was the Prince of NASCAR there for a long time, and he's basically just kept it. I mean, he only ran half a season and was still the most popular driver. That's crazy.
And you know, I think it's a very real possibility he wins most popular driver next year.
Oh, write it down. It's a done deal.
Next year.
I don't surprise me.
Even when he's not racing, he will be the most popular driver.
Well, he might not. He probably won't be on the ballot for that one.
I don't think he'll be eligible, but there'll be a write-in, and he'll win it.
If he runs one race.
You know, they talked about, don't they do a fan vote for the All-Star race? He's going to get in the 2018 All-Star race because everyone's going to write him in. Mm-hmm. But back to my point of, you know, there's plenty of other talented drivers for fans to pick from that you don't have to say. And for me, I was a Tony Stewart fan. I'm a little lost. I was a little lost in the offseason of who I was going to pick, but I think I'm leaning more and more towards Kyle Larson. I like Kyle Larson. The only thing that doesn't match up with what Tony is that Kyle doesn't have that Tony fire that I fell in love with. That's what I loved about Tony, was that he'd tell you to go screw yourself. Well, and, you know, sometimes to his detriment, sometimes to his success. I loved that fire.
Tony got into the limelight he was a little bit older than what Kyle hit it at. So Kyle, I think, was maybe a little more seasoned at a younger age, and he didn't go through the IndyCar deals like Tony Stewart did. But, Kyle's got the fire. I think he's just, you know, he carries it a little bit different. And he's a lot smaller guy than Tony Stewart. You know, Tony's kind of a broad-shoulder dude, you know.
Tony could defend himself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Kyle can. I mean, we met Kyle last year at Knoxville. He's not a very big guy, you know. You know, him and Casey Kane and some of these guys, they ain't going to jump out of a car and start swinging at anybody. They won't even swing at Ricky Stenhouse because they know Danica could come over and kick their butt.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of upsets me that people think that all of a sudden NASCAR is going to fall by the wayside. Now, don't take that conversation as thinking that everything's going to be hunky-dory at Daytona in 2018. I think there are going to be ticket sales that are going to be lost, and I think there are going to be ratings that we're going to see some effect. We saw it already with the retirement of Jeff Gordon and the retirement of Tony Stewart, that tracks are saying that ticket sales are down about 5%. From 2016, and then in 2016 they were saying they were down a couple of percent. So they're able to, they're blaming the lower ticket sales on the loss of these big powerhouses. And you want to talk about some big powerhouses that have retired: Jeff Gordon, Tony Stewart, Greg Biffle, and now Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Carl Edwards. Those are all drivers that put butts in seats.
Oh, absolutely. And another thing that was kind of interesting at the press conference was when somebody, just like I said, you know, well, when are you going to have your Junior Motorsports in the Cup Series. And his sister said, that ain't happening. She knows how much more work that would be.
Yeah.
And she's the one that pretty much runs that show over there. It's Dale Jr.'s name on it, And Dale's got so much other stuff going on. I mean, most people know that he's got Junior Motorsports, and most people know that he's got a nice, huge bar, honky-tonk bar there in Charlotte, Whiskey River. Now he's got a brand of whiskey. I don't remember the name of it right off the top of my head. But
he gave a shameless plug for that during the press conference, didn't he?
But he's also owns a Chevy dealership in Tallahassee, Florida.
Yep.
Which was something his dad did, but I think his dad's dealership was somewhere in North Carolina. I don't remember specifically, but I've actually seen Dale Earnhardt Chevrolet tags on cars. He's also got
he's got a lot of stuff in the fire.
He's opening another bar.
There's a lot of speculation of what he's going to do in 2018, and I think much like Carl Edwards. Now with Carl Edwards, I think it's a different situation. Carl had a lot of opportunities, but so far this year we haven't seen him at the track and engaging with teams. It feels kind of like Carl is stepping away from the sport completely. As to where I think Dale Earnhardt Jr., you're going to see him getting more involved with the ownership portion. I mean, you and I talked about maybe he'll buy into part ownership of the 88 team, and he'll put his guy in there, whether it be Justin Allgaier, Alex Bowman, one of his Xfinity drivers in there, and they'll be co-owned. Rick Hendrick will run the team, but Dale will be the co-owner in it.
Well, it's like with Jeff Gordon and the 48.
Right.
He's the half owner. That's why Rick Hendrick could sell Dale half of the 88. And that would put him back to 3 cars, and he could put a 5th car in out of Hendrick Motorsports that he would own with the other half ownerships, and he'd still be perfectly legal. And like I said, I would not be surprised on the outside edge to see Jeffrey Earnhardt in that car.
Yeah, it's you said that on Facebook, and I think there's a lot of other guys that would take advantage of it, but maybe you put an Earnhardt in that car and keep the name going. Who knows? I mean, who knows what's going to happen? And there's going to be a lot of turnover at Hendrick Motorsports. The way the Casey Kane season is going, I think he's done at the end of this year in that 5 car. But I've said that for a couple of years and been wrong each time.
Well, and he's actually having a pretty decent year compared to what he's had the last 3 or 4 years. He hasn't won yet, but he's getting a lot more running up front.
True. Let's take a break. We'll come back at turn number 3. We'll talk about the old guard, the current guard, and the new guard. We'll be back here on the front stretch.
Need a reason to be at Kansas Speedway when NASCAR returns on May 13th? Here's some. Reason number 18, the friction fueling phenom Kyle Busch. Reason number 48, 7-time champ Jimmy Johnson versus 14, Kansas's own Clint Boyer, grinding and battling at 180 miles per hour. Kinda hits you right in the adrenaline maker. The Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series Go Bowling 400, live, Saturday night, May 13th. Tickets at KansasSpeedway.com.
Are you looking to book your next outing? Look no further than Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. Located just north of Bass Pro Shop, Joe's Karting can handle outings of well over 100-plus people. Bachelor parties, corporate outings, team building, birthday parties, and much more. Give Buddy a call today and reserve your outing. Joe's will even work with local restaurants to cater your event. Book yours today at joeskarting.com. That's karting with a K. It's time to get to Joe's and find out what everyone already knows.
If you love wings, if you love rings, and all kinds of other tempting things, great times, great food, get to Quaker Steak and Lube.
Quaker Steak and Lube is the official watering hole for the front stretch and the best place to catch all the NASCAR action today. Open at 11 a.m. with delivery available to Council Bluffs.
Great times, great food, get to Quaker Steak and Lube.
Feather the brake and get back to the gas. Dan and Dirk are headed into turn 3 on the front stretch.
Welcome back to the front stretch. Turn number 3 brought to you by Menards, NHRA Heartland Nationals, presented by Minties at Heartland Park in Topeka on May 19th, 20th, and 21st. Get your tickets by calling 1-800-884-NHRA or going to heartlandpark.com. Rip roaring action down at Heartland Park Topeka for the NHRA Kansas Nationals. Would love to go down there, but I've got a big race weekend that weekend, so I am stuck up here in Omaha.
Well, it's a very nice facility. I've been to several dirt races down there back when they used to cover the drag strip, and they had World Outlaws on. You talk about a paper clip of a track.
Wow.
As they were going down one lane one way and come back the other lane. So 2 U-turns and 2 drag strips. And I worked my first truck race there in 99 when they used to run the trucks on the road course there. So I like the facility. Not that far of a drive. So if you get a chance, you can make that a day trip. You could drive down Sunday morning. The biggest difference between a NASCAR race and an NHRA race is anybody and everybody can get a pit pass for like $35 or $40. So then NHRA race, you can go down and get autographs with your favorite drivers, but take some hearing protection.
I was just going to say that. I could not believe how much louder those
funny cars and alcohol cars are. Those things are so loud. I mean, just incredible. I mean, they're loud from miles away. You need earplugs, headphones, something to protect your hearing.
It's really, I mean, and don't try to be that tough guy hero, because if you're the tough guy hero at 30, you'll be the guy at 70 going, huh? What did you say? What did you say? And I'm already experiencing that a little bit now. I've started wearing more ear protection while doing pit reporting and working at the racetracks, because you don't notice it right away, but that little tingle you get in your eardrum, that's damage.
Well,
and you'll get that at the NHRA Kansas Nationals, especially if you go down May 20th, 19th, 20th, and 21st.
Yeah, I mean, I've got it. I tried to get a job with the TSA, and I couldn't pass their hearing test.
Wow.
Plain and simple.
Heartlandpark.com or 1-800-884-NHRA. Do yourself a favor. If you want to find out, get a little sample of what the Kansas Nationals are going to be like, head down to Pacific Junction, south on 29, to I-29 drag strip. I-29 Dragway, I think is what it's called now.
Used to be the Mid-American Motorplex.
Right. And is it Saturday that they run the drag strip?
I thought it was Friday nights. It's 8th Mile, but...
you know what, maybe it's Saturday they run the road course.
That could be, but I'm pretty sure the drag racing is Friday nights.
I think you're right.
And I've seen some video of it. I haven't been down for a drag race down there yet, but they seem to have pretty good racing. I mean, it's a Dallas day for me, so Friday nights just aren't good for me.
Yeah.
But, get on down there and... if you've
cheap,
going to got a car that you think you want to try and think it's bad, go over there. They do have some safety rules depending on how fast you think your car will go. You're going to have to wear a helmet, but certain speeds got to have a roll bar. You got to have a driver's suit, et cetera, et cetera. But, even if it's literally just a street car, they'll have bracket race nights. I raced my 21-second quarter-mile Suburban before and got to the semifinals one round on a $1,000 to win bracket bonanza. So,
once again, we're talking about that down at I-29 Dragway at Pacific Junction. But 1-800-884-NHRA Kansas... 1-800-884-NHRA for the Kansas Nationals. You can also go to heartlandpark.com May 19th, 20th, and 21st. Dirk, when Carl Edwards announced his retirement, they kind of got to talking about who's next. Actually, when Jeff Gordon announced his retirement was when the who's next conversation really started, because Jeff was one of the bigger names that had retired in a while. Then Tony Stewart retired, and then we saw Carl Edwards retire. And so Matt Kenseth has been in the crosshairs for who's next.
For a couple of years.
For 3 retirements in a row, and he's survived.
Well, and he even said when he just had his thing, when everybody thought he was going to go ahead and say goodbye.
Yeah.
And nope, just new sponsor. Just got somebody else going to hang around with me for a race or two. And
he plans on racing for 2018, and good for him. If he can do it, then do it. I think, like you talked about, there's a lot of things that went into Dale's retirement, and I think pure speculation. It probably had to do with the injury. And him thinking, you know what, there's other things I could do and still help this sport, still be involved.
I'm sure that injury really scared him.
Yeah.
Because it's not like he was sitting in the race car going, man, I'm all messed up. He got out of the car and raced the next week, and then it was like, wow, I am messed up,
Yeah. And by the way, it took 6 months to recover.
Yep.
And most of the time, when you hear about an NFL player having a concussion, he's out for a week, maybe 2 weeks.
A week to 3, yeah.
But for the most part, they're pretty quickly recovered. They wouldn't let him get back in the car. So it was either really high standards, which would be good, or it was a pretty severe injury that we don't know the full story for. But the next guys I think that are on the retirement block, when you talk about the old guard, the guys that have been around for a long time, probably 15 to 25 seasons. Kevin Harvick is probably one of the first guys I'm thinking of as I'm looking through this list. And then you've got, is Clint in that list to you? Is he an old guard?
Not yet, because almost last year was almost like a vacation year for him. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a whole lot going on. I don't think he had any of the pressure or anything. But now that he's back in, the wheelhouse with a good team and running up front, he's going to start feeling the pressure. And that's part of the toll that these guys get.
Yeah.
But these guys have realized, a la Jimmy Johnson, how much fitness, really plays in what they do, and being able to go out and sit in that 140-degree car and concentrate for 3 hours. Jimmy does these Ironman triathlons. Carl Edwards is a huge fitness nut. I know Ricky Stenhouse is. Danica's real big on her yoga stuff that she does, but whatever floats your boat in fitness. But all these guys do a ton of that. Michael Waltrip was a big runner.
I wonder what Brendan does. Brendan Gaughan.
I think he runs around a casino.
Okay.
But
it's a good thing he doesn't listen to the show and hear how much crap we give him.
he knows. I mean, that they had that video on there with him running through the pits that was so hilarious. Two months ago or something. But Brendan's, his body has gone through many transformations over the 15 or so years that I've known him. I mean, he's gone from a 200-pounder to a 140-pounder and back to 200, and then I think he's settled somewhere in between. But when you can live a comfortable lifestyle and, as long as your body's acclimated and, I don't really think he has the desire to go up to Cup anymore. He likes where he's at. He doesn't race near as much.
It's a little bit easier. It's not as tasking on you. And I like the Xfinity cars, because especially the Xfinity races, because they're a little bit quicker. I think Cup races should be the length of Xfinity races, quite frankly. But that's a conversation for another show.
Well, exactly. With like a qualifying race, it'd be you run a 150-mile race to get into the Daytona 500. Why do you got to run 500? Why don't they just call it the Daytona 650 and put it all together?
Right. So Clint Bowyer not in that old guard.
No, I don't think so. I would say Kurt Busch.
Okay. Well, let me continue through the list here, and we'll talk about agreeing and disagreeing. Matt Kenseth is the next. Yep. I'm going by car number, by the way. Just keep it easy. Matt Kenseth, I think, is easily in the old guard. So is Ryan Newman. I see Kurt Busch. I agree with that one. Jimmy Johnson's probably in the old guard. Yep. I think Jimmy Johnson's retirement plans really depend on when he wins number 8. If he doesn't win it this year and he doesn't win it next year, then I think the retirement creeps in a little bit quicker. But I think once he wins 8, I think he'll retire. Maybe he'll finish out his contract, but I think that's going to be the big deciding factor. Because if I was Jimmy Johnson, that's the only goal you have left in NASCAR, is to win an 8th championship.
And, these guys you're talking about are all guys that race their first Cup race in like 01 or 02. Where Bowyer and Carl came in late in 04. And Carl, he kind of got – I don't really want to say he got screwed out of it, but when he ran 9 races and he could only run 7 in 2004, so he didn't get a chance to ever run for Rookie of the Year. Yeah. He was almost a shoo-in. That's why they made it such a big deal for him to win the Busch title, A very good driver that never had a shot at a truck title. He was in Roush's truck a year and a half, before he went up to the Cup Series. But, Bowyer went up in 2005, and so those guys had kind of, they're on the outside edge of the old dogs, but...
What about Truex?
No.
He's younger, but I think, what is he about? He came in about 08, 09?
I was going to say, I think he came in 06 or 07, I think. But he was in the Busch Series there for several years. He was kind of in the Busch Series a little bit longer than a lot of people, when they move up. But
and then you've got Dale Earnhardt Jr., who I think he's right on the bubble for old guard.
Well, no, see, I think he is old guard. 2000 was his rookie year.
Oh, yeah, okay. Good point. I was thinking he was later than that.
Yeah, no, 2000 was his rookie year. And
Jamie Mack.
01 was when he started running up with the big boys. So, yeah, he's got to be considered in there, even though he was young when he got started. So, he wasn't quite as Kyle Larson age, but, he was still young.
Yeah, I think a lot of those guys are going to be gone in probably the next 5 years.
And, they just had it on one of the races here. It was late last year because Biffle was still running. Him and Biffle were making like their 500 or 600 start or something like that, And you think of Jamie Mack, and God, he's been there that long.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So those are the guys we're going to talk about are probably going to be gone in the next 5, maybe 6 years. There could be 1 or 2 of them that, they get good rides. They're able to extend their deal. Who knows? Matt Kenseth could be in there for the next 6, 7 years. You just never know what's going to happen.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised to see a bunch more guys go the way of Tony Stewart.
Yeah.
And for the last year or 2 of their career, be a team owner.
the young guard that is coming up into the sport, and these are the guys that have been racing for a couple years. I'm not talking about Rookie of the Year candidates or this is their first season. You know, someone like Chris Buescher, who filled in last year and has raced here and there. I don't really see him as a new guard guy because he's not locked into the series. Someone like Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, I see them as they've got longevity in this sport, but I think Chris is, even though he's talented, it's still a little shaky on what's going to happen with him.
Well, he's on the edge, but I mean, he ran for Rookie of the Year last year. Was the only rookie that got a win.
Yeah, yep. Again,
and he's been qualifying good this year. He hasn't had quite the race finishes that he would want, but he's in a little bit better equipment and stuff this year, and he's doing just fine. But you've got your main three is going to be, actually main four is going to be Blaney, Elliott, Kyle Larson, and Eric Jones.
Right. I think the Dillon brothers get in there too.
Yeah, because they're going to be around for a while. Austin, as this is his third year in Cup Series, where Ty's first year, and deservedly so. Even though he's older than Ty, I do believe he is more talented. You know, as shows with the fact that he had then a nationwide series title, but his brother couldn't duplicate with the same equipment.
I think he had two, right? Didn't he win two nationwide
He might
titles?
have one too. But
Daniel Suarez can also be counted in that young guard class. See who, I think that's it. Maybe Corey LaJoy, but again, I think he's kind of one of those shaky rides. But the whole point of this conversation is that even though we're losing probably the most popular drivers that we've seen since Richard Petty, I think we have an amazing class coming in, and Kyle Larson is really going to carry that banner a lot. I think he has the opportunity to be the next Tony Stewart in the sense that he can really bridge that gap that was created between NASCAR and dirt track. And that gap is pretty large. The two fan bases kind of resent each other. Well, and it's unfortunate because I don't understand why. I think there's a group like me and you that like both. And we'll watch both and we'll support both. But I think that's a small percentage compared to dirt track fans have a lot of animosity towards the NASCAR series. And I think NASCAR fans tend to look down on the dirt track series.
A lot of that is NASCAR used to only have one national touring dirt series. They still sponsor your weekly racing tracks and have state champions and everything. But they used to have the Busch All-Star Tour back through the 80s, 90s, and the very early 2000s. They discontinued it. And at that same point, they also made it kind of a stepping stone deal to where you couldn't just get out of your dirt late model and go race Daytona. You know, you could never do that, but you could go down there and get a test in, say, an ARCA car, and if you went out and ran and everything in your test went good, then NASCAR would let you race with them. But they went to where you had to drive asphalt late models. You know, you had to go up the progression. And like now, you know, you got to go race a truck first or an Xfinity car at Richmond or, you know, something like that.
Which I kind of like that rule because, God, it would just be hazardous to put a rookie out there at Talladega or Daytona. And I know that's an extreme case, but to put them out there on the Monster Energy level and the real possibility they're going to cause a lot of damage and possibly hurt somebody because they don't have the experience to handle the car.
Well, yeah, but they're going to have their own money to be able to go to do that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, Joe Koziski ran Talladega, you know, and stuff like that. And he didn't have a whole lot of time on anything but a dirt track before he went and ran some of that stuff, Atlanta and Talladega and some of these bigger tracks. Same with Josh Krug. Josh Krug's run all that stuff in an ARCA car. Josh Krug ran in the top 10 in points in ARCA, missing a race.
I think he finished. I thought Chris told me he finished top 5 in the points, and
I don't remember him being in the top 5. I remember finished like 8th or 9th in points. I'm going to say in 2007, somewhere around there. And, you know, really no big background at any of these high-speed tracks or whatever. And they run Talladega, they run Pocono. He ran all these places, you know.
Yeah, I to come back around to the point, I think Kyle Larson has that opportunity to bridge the gap like Tony Stewart started. He, in the middle of his career, he started racing sprint cars more and going out to dirt track races, and then he bought his own World of Outlaw team, and now he owns a series, and now he owns Eldora. And Tony was starting to bridge that gap to where I think a lot of NASCAR fans that didn't know that there was local dirt tracks to go see on Fridays and Saturdays all of a sudden heard, hey, Tony Stewart's running with the World of Outlaws at I-80 Speedway or at Eagle, or he's going over to Knoxville for the Knoxville Nationals. I'm a big Tony Stewart fan. I'm going to run over there. I think Kyle Larson has that same opportunity to bridge that gap because he is such a polarizing figure now.
Well, Kenny Schrader started it. And Kenny Schrader's such a super guy.
Yeah.
And he has never quit racing the dirt tracks. Mm-hmm. He was a barnstormer even when he was running for Rick Hendrick and whatnot. If he could fit in the Wednesday night race in Nebraska, he was here.
Yeah. And by the way, you could still catch him usually for the Cornhusker Classic or one of those late races.
Or the Silver Dollars.
Speedway.
I mean, he's usually here once a year.
Yeah, he'll be here for that too, won't he?
And he's bought a dirt track. He hasn't bought a series yet, but he owns I-55 Speedway down in Missouri.
Poor guy.
And, he's doing what he loves to do. He loves to race,
Let's we'll wrap it up. And for those of you, the point of this conversation, the world's not ending
at all.
At
not
Homestead.
at all.
Dale's still going to be around, and I think the sport is still going to be around. It may go through a more of a little bit of a shrink, more of a tightening of the belt as Dale steps away in 2018. But I think this younger class that's coming up has an opportunity to carry the banner and bring in some new blood. And I think that, thankfully, these guys are social media savvy because that's a saving grace for NASCAR, and it's a saving grace for dirt trackers.
Well, you're not going to see these guys get out and punch each other in the nose anymore because of all the bad media, the bad press that brings, and how it hurts the sponsors. Even though some sponsors, I'm sure there's still a guy sitting with a cigar and a beer on Sunday morning watching this race going, I just wish he'd get out and kick his butt, you know. That guy's still out there, and if you got him as your sponsor, go ahead and get out of the car.
And eventually we're going to get one or two of those guys that are going to come back into the sport. I think right now between Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Eric Jones, and Ryan Blaney, I think those are four guys that they aren't quick to fight like Harvick, Keselowski, Busch, Stewart. But then again, you could have said that about Gordon, who he got into a couple of fights at the end of his career.
Jeff Burton is the good one, but yeah, those you got two of those names with Blaney and Elliott, are next generation Cup guys, and you got the two others that are new to the sport, so to speak, as far as coming into Cup Garage,
right?
But they're both at home. All four of them. They're gonna be here a while,
Yeah.
None of them are getting kicked out after 1 or 2 years if they don't win. They're all going to be here a while. They're all with good organizations,
Oh, and talking about those four guys, the next speculation is who's going to fill in the gap on that 88. I mean, Rick Hendrick with his ability to go out and fill
Hendrick's going in that car. I'm telling you.
Sponsorship's not going to be an issue at Hendrick Motorsports, even though I don't think Dale's entire year was paid for. I think he still had a couple of races to get sponsored this year. But Rick can go out and spend the money and has the credibility to pull in a big name. But I truly do hope that Alex Bowman is in that 88 next year because I think that would be a great story of someone that Rick didn't go and buy wins. It wouldn't be like the New York Yankees when somebody is on another team and they're a successful player. The Yankees will go and buy him and just spend an absurd amount of money to win World Series. I hope Rick doesn't take that route and go and buy out Kyle Larson's contract just to have Kyle Larson and bring his wins to Hendrick Motorsports, or go and buy out Blaney's contract, or one of these up-and-coming guys. I hope he gives Alex Bowman a chance.
Well, I'm not a huge Alex Bowman fan, but Alex did prove last year that he could handle that car. I don't know if he can handle all the rest of the pressure that goes with being, whoever fills in for Dale Earnhardt, whoever takes his seat.
Oh, big seat, big shoes, right?
Big shoes, huge shoes, I mean.
Well, that's just like we talked about with when Tony Stewart left the 20. Joey Logano didn't deal well with filling that seat.
No.
And I think that was a major reason why he struggled at Joe Gibbs Racing. Once he got out of JGR and over to Penske, it was a completely different environment, and it was kind of like the chains were lifted, and he was able to be the driver he wanted to be.
Right. You're no longer Tony. Just go drive the race car.
Right.
And he's put in a couple real good, solid years, But, yeah, I don't know if Alex Bowman is the correct choice there. I really don't. There's a couple other guys in the junior stable right now. This William Byron's kind of setting the world on fire.
And he's got to deal with Hendrick, so that could be a very real possibility.
That could, that's a very real possibility.
I believe him and Bowman both had developmental deals with Hendrick.
But, I mean, he's the next up-and-comer. So whether they'll want to season him for another year or two, like you said, Casey Kane might be out the door.
What do you
so
think?
They both might be up there.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm trying to get it wrapped up before we end we head into turn 4. But what do you think the chances are that that Hendrick drops down to 3 cars for a time being. So
Zero.
maybe 2018, 2019.
0.
Okay.
That can't happen. I mean, he'd have to lay off too many people.
True.
So, yeah,
Very
I don't
true.
see that happening.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back in turn number 4. We'll preview Richmond. We'll be back here on the front stretch.
The NHRA Mellow Yellow Drag Racing Series is headed back to Topeka. Feel the power that pulls the senses with 10,000 horsepower at speeds over 330 miles per hour. Every ticket's a pit pass at the Menards NHRA Heartland Nationals, presented by Minties, May 19th through 21st at Heartland Park, Topeka. Kids 12 and under are free in general admission. Get tickets early and save at nhra.com/tickets or call 800-884-NHRA. Ignite your senses.
Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs has taken a page out of IMCA's rulebook and gone crate. These brand new low-emission engines will still have you white-knuckling it all through the Metro's fastest indoor facility. Joe's Karting is now friendly for all skill levels with their brand new Honda-powered engines. It's time to get to Joe's today and find out what drivers like Jack Dover, Shaylee Bate, and Andrew Kosiski have known for years. Located in Council Bluffs and online at joeskarting.com. That's karting with a K.
It's checkers or wreckers as we enter turn 4 on the front stretch, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs.
Heading into turn number 4, brought to you by Quaker Steak and Lube, the official watering hole of the front stretch. The Toyota Owners 400 at Richmond International Raceway is on Fox and MRN today. Coverage kicks off at 12:30 with the green flag set to wave a little after 1 o'clock. Get over to Quaker Steak and Lube, the official watering hole of the front stretch, for all the green flag action on the big screens in the Brickyard. Also head over there this Wednesday. They're going to try and do bike night again. They got canceled last week because of the cold and the wind. And this Thursday is scheduled to be the first classic car cruising. So you can come over both nights and say hi to me. We can talk a little bit of racing, and you can check out the bikes and check out the cars on Wednesday and Thursday, respectively.
As long as global warming cooperates.
Thank you very much. Let's talk about Richmond. This race last year, there's 2 races that we go to each year. This one last year, you talked about it. Carl Edwards moved to his teammate Kyle Busch to get the win, and Kyle finished second, followed by Jimmy Johnson, Casey Kane, Kevin Harvick, and Denny Hamlin. Matt Kenseth Harvick finished 5th, Hamlin finished 6th, then Kenseth, Logano, Truex Jr., and Kurt Busch, your top 10. Rough days for...
It was a rough day for me. It kept me out of the playoffs. Kept me out of the chase in the
you had
fantasy
Kyle.
league. Yeah,
you had
because I had Kyle.
That one win would have got you in. Let's see. Clint Boyer, who was driving the 15 last year for...
No, he was driving the 51. No,
it was the 15. It was the Phoenix Charter.
Oh, that's right.
But
Yep.
they were driving the 15 for H. Scott Motorsports in
H. Hunter, same thing.
It's close. But Clinton had a lot of tough days last year. Not a lot of tough days for your top runners, though, for this race last year. Let's look forward to the final race of the regular season Richmond last year. Denny Hamlin came home with the race win. Kyle Larson second. Martin Truex Jr. third. Keselowski and Harvick rounded out your top 5. Kane, McMurray, Kurt, and Kyle Busch, respectively, 8th and 9th, with Joey Logano rounding out your top 10. Matt Kenseth had a rough day, so did Ryan Blaney. Carl Edwards had a rough day, which doesn't matter nowadays. Ryan Newman finished outside the top 20. So there you go. That's your Richmond this time last year. Talk a little bit about Richmond as we wrap up the show for today.
I always liked going to the racetrack there. Small, D-shaped, 3/4 mile, just a big arc. They don't go straight on the front straightaway. It does work into a true 2-groove track. So there'll be a lot of side-by-side racing.
They talk a lot, I'm pretty sure it's Richmond, about it being a self-cleaning track. That when wrecks happen there, they tend to cause a lot of damage with other cars because there's really nowhere to go.
Well, that's not a self-cleaning track. A self-cleaning track is your bank track like Dover and like Bristol, because when you crash, you're coming down off the track to the infield. That's a self-cleaning track. Everything will go to the bottom. But Richmond's not like that. But Richmond is so tight. Again, it's only 3/4 of a mile.
Yeah.
Basically shaped like Iowa Speedway. And at 3/4 of a mile, there are tight quarters. It gets into the last 100 laps of that race. Cautions will breed cautions. They'll be, once you start bumping and banging there, then it's payback time. Mm-hmm. You guys will hit in turn 3 and 4, and if he takes your spot, you're going to get him back in 1 and 2. And
and it's a narrow straightaway, right?
It's not real wide, but again, when you've got a small track, you can't have a Michigan type straightaway or a Talladega type straightaway. The straightaway is probably wide enough for 4 cars, in all honesty, maybe 5, but you can't race down there and expect to get any type of line going into the turn. Yeah. So you're going out to the wall in the back straightaway on the fast line, whether you run off the top or the bottom in the turns.
Picks are due by 1 p.m. today on NASCAR Pools Online for both fantasy contests. Today is the wrap-up for the Crewman for a Day contest. We've got a little bit of a separation, only a 5-point lead for our winner, but the top 5 are sitting in a good spot because 6th is a little bit farther back. So unless we have another race like we had last weekend at Bristol, which is very possible, I think we're going to see a top 5 stay relatively the same.
Well, the hope would be is that you get a qualifying round in, and that you get qualifying and you're not starting off the points again. Because if you start off the points again due to rain or something like that, then it really makes it tough to pick because so many people, pretty much you probably used – the best guy you thought for that race. So everybody's, I know there are a bunch of people that have already used Keselowski. A bunch of people have already used Kyle Busch, and Keselowski's still up front in the points. Kyle Larson's still up front in the points, but a lot of people have used him already. Yeah. So you're going to be back to, picking guys that are starting 8th, 9th, 10th, as your top guy, and it's going to make it tough.
All right, we got to wrap it up for today.
Stage points will be big.
Yeah, we got to wrap it up for today. We'll be back next weekend to do it all over again. That'll be, we're going to work on, again, getting you an NHRA Kansas Nationals interview, and 2 weeks from now, we're going to bring you that interview with Thomas Kennedy. You know what? That'll be at Kansas Speedway, so it'll have to be 3 weeks from now. We'll have to air that, but we're going to get it May 5th, this coming Friday at the Bobby Parker Memorial at I-80 Speedway, weather permitting.
And what we'd like to do is to whomever happens to win this Crewman for a Day contest, we would like to bring you into the studio next Thursday. It'll be in the afternoon, and if you got to wait till after work, 4:30, 5 o'clock, we'll work with you. But we'd like to get you in the studio, and we're going to try and get Mike Mittler on the phone and do about 15 minutes, so you'll get a little introduction with Mike, and he's going to kind of tell you what you'll have to look forward to when you go down to Kansas for the Crewman for a Day contest.
We appreciate everybody joining us. Make sure you listen in next Sunday as the Front Stretch brings it again. We will roll on next Sunday for all the
high, wide, and handsome.
Boy, Talladega next Sunday. Again, coverage for today's Toyota Owners 400 at Richmond or on the big screens at Quaker Steak and Lube starting at 12:30 with the green flag just a little after 1. For Dirk Houston, I'm Dan Taylor. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next weekend to do it all over again on the Front Stretch, presented by Joe's Karting on AM 590, Omaha's ESPN Radio.
NASCAR returns to Kansas Speedway May 13th. Here's some reasons to be there. Reason number 88, Dale Flippin Jr. Enough said. Number 2, Keselowski-style cold ones are always BYOB. Reason 78, your memory of Martin Truex Jr. will be both crystal clear and a blur. The Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series Go Bowling 400. Live, Saturday night, May 13th. Tickets at kansasspeedway.com.
The official watering hole of the Front Stretch has you covered any day of the week with the best wings, great burgers, and amazing steaks. Each weekday from 4 to 6 is happy hour, featuring $1 off draft and well drinks plus $4 Luberitas. Mondays are kids' night. Tuesdays are all-you-can-eat wings for $12.95, and the lube even delivers to the Council Bluffs area. Like Quaker Steak and Lube Council Bluffs on Facebook for a full list of weekly events.
Get to Quaker Steak and Lube.
Mid-America Drive, Council Bluffs.
Are you looking to book your next outing? Look no further than Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. Located just north of Bass Pro Shop, Joe's Karting can handle outings of well over 100 plus people. Bachelor parties, corporate outings, team building, birthday parties, and much more. Give Buddy a call today and reserve your outing. Joe's will even work with local restaurants to cater your event. Book yours today at joeskarting.com. That's karting with a K. It's time to get to Joe's and find out what everyone already knows.
This has been the Front Stretch Radio Show, presented by Joe's Karting in Council Bluffs. To contact Dan or Dirk, find them on Facebook at The Front Stretch or email them at frontstretch590@gmail.com. If you missed any part of today's show or want to hear a previous show, subscribe to the Joe's Karting YouTube page where you can find almost every Front Stretch show.